Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining for our final Yes Speakers series for the day. Today we're joined by Ian Rolston, who will share a talk on surviving critiques, something that we could all use some help with. Before we get started, we would like to acknowledge that the land on which George Brown College is situated is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation and other Indigenous peoples who have lived on this land. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community and on this territory. Across the School of Design, we remain committed to identifying and removing systemic barriers to accessing college programs and services, and are committed to identifying strategies, tools, and actions to better support our Indigenous student population. In a commitment to build connections and opportunities for students to engage with design's visionaries, Yes features a week-long lecture series, 18 to be exact. The design-focused speaker series has been cultivated in an effort to provide opportunities that are dynamic and unique in order to allow members of our community, including students and faculty, to engage. Honest advice for designers from really good designers connects the School of Design with those who have impacted the industry on a local and global scale. We encourage you to ask any questions you have for Ian in the chat. With that, I would like to introduce Ian Rolston. Ian is an incredibly creative soul, inspired by connecting humanity to what matters most. After working for the world's top brands and companies, he founded Decanthropy, a methodology and inclusive design consultancy that helps reimagine spaces for projects, places, and people. As a thought leader, registered design professional, and speaker, Rolston encourages relying on one's sense of humanity to inform design solutions. His insights, studio workshops, and project collaborations focus clients on establishing better work, better play, better moments of connection, and better expressions of care. Moderating the Q&A portion of today's session is graphic design graduate David Hosang. David has had a lifelong interest in comics and storytelling, developed into a love of branding, identity, and editorial design. As the primary designer and creator at Eat, Sleep, Meep, David designs, writes, and illustrates the stories of a playful cast of animal characters who appear on t-shirts, stationery pins, and soon-to-be-added plush dolls and vinyl figurines. The love of storytelling informed David's design thesis project, which focuses on Toronto's struggling music communities. The Music Notes identity engages users through social media and utilizes an editorial strategy in the form of a quarterly magazine. The goal is to preserve, archive, and share the stories and history of Toronto's music venues and the artists who have impacted Toronto and Canada's musical identity. In his spare time, David enjoys anything to do with music, cooking, baking, and hopes one day he can be reincarnated as a penguin or an owl. Thank you and welcome, David. With that, I would like to turn it over to Ian to get us started with this presentation.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you, David, for moderating this session today. It's a great honor for me and a privilege to be with your group.
I think, Ian, your deck's not showing PowerPoint. If you want to just pull up. And you can just pull up the PowerPoint slide at the bottom there. Should work.
Sure. Can you see it?
Yep, go ahead. You can hit play at the top there. Thank you.
Okay, sweet. Okay. So I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me and having me a part of this fantastic program this week. Today we're focusing our conversation around the idea of critiques. And what I want to leave with you are a couple of just tools and techniques to survive them. I myself was horrible at critiques when I first started in school and even as a young designer. I was extremely nervous by the sort of jarring sort of spotlight that it seems to put on you. And I had to learn how not to take it so personally in order to even get my ideas across. So what I want to share today with you are just a couple of tips in order to frame your critiques so that you can focus really the outcomes and the energy on the work and not necessarily you. So I won't go through sort of my introduction, but I do want to say that I am extremely interested in shifting thinking. And so today, my goal is to shift the way that you think about critiques and really understand that they are a great opportunity for you to share your ideas and really share your perspective of how you see the world through through your design. So I'm going to talk about this in the context of the 5 T's of critiques. And the first really is the idea of tell. It's extremely important when you step into a critique to tell a story, engage with your audience, and really share with them why the problem that you're trying to solve matters. There is great evidence and research that shows that telling stories are really great opportunities to connect with your audience uh, for the purpose, for the reason that they actually help to share your identity, your values, things that are important to you. And they actually cause a moment where people can connect with you. And it's important to do this in a critique so that you help to set the stage in which you're going to share the information that you want your audience to consume and to consider. And so there's 3 elements of tell that I want to share with you. The first is share a very clear message. When you're in a critique, you want to be very specific about what you want your audience to consider. So tell it to them plainly, tell it to them in a clear method. Then reinforce that problem or how you're going to go about looking at that problem with personal experiences and sort of narratives that really sort of humanize how you're going to approach speaking and engaging with your audience. And then give them opportunities throughout your presentation and your introductions to reflect with their own personal experiences and to consider the information that you're sharing. So this is the first T. You want to make sure that you spend some time and tell a clear message. Support that with very personal lived experiences because it speaks to your authenticity. And then invite the audience through moments of pause and consideration to reflect on what you're sharing with them. So that's the first T. The second T is to transform. I know for me, when I was first involved with being critiqued, it felt like it was something that was happening to me, which made me extremely uncomfortable. And it's not until I matured in the industry that I realized that this was an opportunity for me to actually transform a room and to be able to spotlight the design challenge that I wanted the room to engage with and understand, and also to sort of share and understand in my perspective. So the second T tool that I want to give you is to think of how you can transform the room to do some very specific things. The first is to help your listener listen. Provide through your presentation opportunities to really engage with how the audience is going to receive your information, both verbal and visual. And then secondly, share with them what you consider to be your key success factors so that they have a measure in which they can actually take your information in and look at it up against a set of criteria that you give them, and which will help them to parse through the information, receive it, and then apply it to, again, that criteria that you share. And so to do this, to help transform the room, you want to define the language you want to use to share your ideas. And so you will choose this language based on what you're trying to accomplish. Your language can be inclusive, it can be bold and dynamic to provide emphasis. You take a moment to think about how you want to use words to convey your thoughts and your ideas so that it starts to give your audience cues in which they can receive that information that you're sharing. And then the second is to set a flow and of sharing and pausing. You want to create a cadence in your presentation that allows your audience to receive information and then give some space for them to really consider it. I know I had a challenge when I started. I would be so nervous that I would just run through all of my information, all of the facts, to just get it out. But what I realized is that in going so quickly, I did not give my audience enough time to actually consider the information that I was sharing, and they couldn't really respond to it. So sometimes, as a result, the critique that or the feedback that I got was not really connected to helping me advance the criteria that I was setting within the work. So setting a flow and of sharing and pausing is important. And then invite your audience to engage and to see your perspective. Give your audience permission to feel comfortable enough to really grapple with the information that you're sharing, so that it doesn't become a situation where you're creating barriers between you, the presenter, and the audience, which is receiving information. You use it as an opportunity to have a conversation, to put your audience at ease, to let them know that really that this is a two-way interaction. It also helps to take some of the focus so squarely off of you, and also to express an importance in your audience participation. And so also communicate what problem you want them to solve. Your audience is full of experience and expertise that can actually assist you in establishing solutions that meet your criteria. So let them know that give them permission to engage with you based upon their expertise. And then share with them how you will know if you have solved your problem. And this is really important, so that when you're receiving feedback, that your feedback is really focused on really asking, did you meet your criteria? Did you meet your goals? And focusing focusing the feedback in that manner really helps you not to necessarily focus on yourself, but on your work, which is what we want to ultimately drive to in a critique. So the third T I want to share with you is this idea of teaching. And this is where you get to exercise a bit of your own control. You can set a foundation that you can stand on, because you then become almost like an expert. So you want to share compelling information when you're in a critique to really inform and engage your audience. And then secondly, you want to share how you've used it to really focus your design response, so that the audience has a clear understanding of, now that you have given them some information that they may not have known before, how they can use that information to inform their interactions with the information that you're providing with them. And so there's a couple of key things to teaching, or the tools that you can use to teach. Perhaps you can teach something that is from a cultural perspective, or a methodology, perhaps from another industry or area of expertise that is interesting and that can inform your process. And then you can also share ideas that are unique to the spaces that you occupy. Share information about things that you geek out over, or experiences that are unique to you as a person, your culture, things that are authentic. Because what that allows is for you then to really share information. And in this way, you become the expert, which helps to take, again, a little bit of that spotlight, uncomfortable sort of feeling that we sometimes have in critiques, to create an opportunity where you're sharing information and not being examined. I found that helped me a great deal when I started being critiqued in school and even professionally. And there is a secret that I want to let you guys in on. We are involved in an industry where being critiqued is a part of our job. So the more comfortable you get with being critiqued, the easier it is to really take the information that you receive and apply it constructively. And so you got to just do your best to take the fear out of it. And I'm hoping that these tools help you to accomplish that. So the last element of teach that I wanted to interject with is sharing to show why it's meaningful, why what you're teaching, why what you're sharing is meaningful. Because the audiences and people connect with meaning. And if you can find elements to teach that are meaningful, you then give an opportunity for the audience to really engage in what you're saying on a very sort of personal level. And again, it starts to take the sort of hierarchy out of the critique so that you are not just the person standing at the room being examined, but you are now really engaging in a conversation. Okay, the next T is target. And this will help you really focus your audience. Let them know what do you need from them. How do you want them to respond to you? Is it a style of critique where you want to be perhaps engaged informally, so it's not so regimented? Do you want them to wait and pause until you're complete all the way through? You decide and set the tone for how you want those interactions to go, and so you won't be taken off guard if while you're presenting something, someone interjects, and sometimes it might throw you off. If you set sort of the rules of engagement beforehand, it helps then for you to understand the types of interactions you're going to have within the critique. And then consider what opportunities would you like their help to establish or inform. Let the audience know that there's an opportunity here within this critique for you to help me achieve my goals, to address some of the issues with achieving my criteria. Because you've now given them those steps, you've given them that information that you are trying, not information, you've given them the criteria that sets out what your success factors are. They can then inform those success factors, which allows you then to constructively apply that information, that feedback, to help you achieve your goals. And so there's a couple of things that you can do to help this targeted approach. Create space to, again, allow your audience to be involved. Perhaps let them know when there are going to be moments within your presentation that they can provide feedback. Give your audience permission to inform the context, not just critique your decisions, but consider the context of the information that you've provided, which will give them an opportunity to think more deeply about their feedback, which then will be more meaningful for you to receive. And then let them know that they have something to offer, that they're not just here in the room to perhaps determine, and a lot of this determination happens in our mind, whether I'm good or bad. That's not the purpose of the critique. The purpose of the critique is really to understand how well have you used the information to address your criteria so that you could, at the end of your project, say, okay, I have successfully met this criteria. So let them know that they have an opportunity to help you do that. And then engage in consideration and collaboration. Have moments within your presentation where you can ask questions of your audience of how they think, or how would they address, or how could they inform a particular area or item or thought or methodology. And then also understand that you don't know everything. So ask for help on the things that you don't know. I have found, even professionally, in reaching out to clients and saying or stating what I understand to be true, or what I know within the creative process and delivering work, and contrast that against what I don't know and what they could share to help me better inform the work. I find really is an extremely positive way in order to engage in conversation that is helpful. Okay. And then the last T is just trust. Trust the work that you put in to developing your thoughts, your ideas, and your criteria. And find a way within those things that are meaningful to you that establish trust. Perhaps it's your research, your depth of research. Perhaps it is your methodologies in ideating. Find elements of the way that you work that you can anchor those outcomes to in your presentation that can reinforce this idea of trust that you have. And then lastly, I want to share with you to trust the technique. And really, I follow these principles while being in a critique or in a presentation. Receive the information with grace, respond with grace. It's important that you understand that the time that you've spent with your audience, the investment of their thinking, the investment of their involvement has value. And you want to express that to your audience and to receive their information with grace. You also want to grapple with the feedback that they give you. You're allowed to do that. If there's something that you don't agree with or something you think that was missed, grapple with it. But also give consideration to that information and share of your perspective. But then also in doing so, gauge that information against how it can be measured to really help advance your goals in establishing, again, that criteria for your work. And in doing so, this will help you to really focus all of the energy and the effort of the critique on the work and really helps you to sort of refocus and reframe that perspective that is not really a critique or an examination of you as a person or as an emerging professional, but it focuses all of the energy and activity on what you are trying to establish with your skill and acumen and talent that is driving just great, fantastic design work. And so I look forward to having a bit of conversation now with you about some of these ideas, and we can share and just have a conversation.
Ian, thank you. That was a much different perspective on critiques that I think I can speak for the School of Design that a lot of us are unaccustomed to, in the sense that stereotypically, anytime a lot of people hear critique, they associate with that with some sort of like design guillotine, like they're going to put their work up on this altar and it's going to be sacrificed to everybody in the classroom. But
right.
I love how you've reframed the idea of critique as it's another design tool. It's a design process, and it's useful as a tool of engagement. I'm just wondering, though, in the cases where, let's say we did follow this process, I know for a fact that I'll implement it in my own practice, but in the event that it doesn't, it seems harsh to say if it doesn't work, but if it doesn't go as planned, like there's no, oh, well, that's it, start over. As I said, it's a process. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one thing to remember is that as designers, we are driving towards, again, this idea of better. So our ideas, while they become final at a point, we know that as designers that there are opportunities that we're going to take to improve upon our ideas, to test them again, to rip them apart, put them back together. So there isn't a finality in discussing design ideas. What there is a focus, and what there should be is a focus on how do we make the ideas better? How do we make the opportunities that discussing our approaches or our methodologies, how do we take those opportunities as moments that enrich the process? So it's important that we don't look or think of a critique as this sort of final entity. It really is the beginning of retooling your idea and making it better. So I actually sort of shy away from wondering or thinking if something works. What I do go back to quite often and in my everyday professional life is asking, did I meet the criteria? Did my solutions establish the criteria, and did it actually achieve better? Those are the two things that I'm driving towards.
That's actually another aspect of your process, which I find so interesting. Back to, let's say back to many of us who were students in, let's say, typography. Very often we would take our work, put it up on the wall or lay it across a desk, and then just sort of stand there and wait for feedback when really we're not setting the parameters. I guess what I want to talk about is how would you explain to younger students how to create that narrative? Because I think a lot of us, when we first started out, it was simply as just like, okay, well, everyone roast away.
Right, right. So the reality is that as we emerge or grow in the profession, the parameters are going to be based on what a client is trying to establish. So we have to become very adept at understanding what the client is looking for and creating criteria that responds. It isn't a matter of us imposing our own design will upon a client to say, if a client says, I love blue, then we have to make sure that we are giving them a solution that incorporates blue. You can't come back to the client and show them a red scheme. That cuts against you being a professional. So I would say that you have to understand that the parameters are going to be defined by someone else, but what we get to define with our talent and our skill is how we respond to that. And so in a critique, this is really an opportunity to share how we respond to that criteria and how that that response is really informed by our perspective and the way that we see the world. And that's the beauty that I love about being a designer, because you could give a designer or many different designers the same problem and everyone will come at it from a different angle. And so that's what makes us unique. And that is actually our strength, I believe.
Yeah, it definitely creates a wide variation for the entire process. Mm-hmm. And I think another issue is that often designers were told, you are not your work, except that often what we do is a key part of our identity. And you talked about trying to, or not trying, but handling criticism with grace. When we hear a critique, people immediately go on the defensive. For beginning designers, how do they navigate that position, or how did you navigate that position when you were starting out?
Right. So at the beginning, quite honestly, it killed me because I thought the criticism was criticizing me, like personally, that I wasn't good enough or I misunderstood what the ask was. And so I took those things very personally. And by nature, you want to please people. You're trying to show your best self. You want to make the grade. You want to really distinguish yourself within your studio environment. And these are all good things to do. But when you receive this type of feedback, you have to understand that, one, it is, I know people say don't take it personally, but you have to, because it's a very personal experience to inform and to share our ideas and our concepts. But what we have to do is reframe where that feeling comes from. We have to look at our work and apply it with a personal sense of integrity, care. But when I talked about creating the criteria of being able to establish what are the key success factors, what are the key items that make the work successful, that's the parameter that you present to your audience, to your critiques, and give them those tools to then inform your work. So being in the position of, I guess, power or in control in that manner really helps to sort of remove that sort of personal uncomfortableness that sort of happens. But the other thing that I would say is that we do have to get comfortable with being critiqued, because it's what we're going to do. You're going to spend an enormous amount of time being critiqued as a professional designer. And so we just have to receive that that is a part of the work, part of the job, and that these tools will help us to manage sort of how we receive that critique. And it gets better over time. Trust me. I'm a lot better now at a critique than I was when I first started. So some things develop over time, but I wish I had some of these tools when I started to help me.
Well, again, looks like we have several audience questions. Okay, so Jasmine says, amazing talk, Ian. You spoke mostly on receiving critique, but do you have any tips for giving critique to others' work?
Oh, absolutely. And this actually works for critiquing others, because you can, if they haven't followed a tip, you can ask a question about the tip. You can say, so tell me a little bit about what are your key success factors? What do you think would make your design decisions a success? Or what determines whether you've met your goal? And so you can frame your critique in a manner that then you can speak to those things directly, that have a more direct impact on how the individual will receive your critique. So it's not a matter of this is good or this is bad. As someone critiquing work, you have to go deeper than that. So that's why I like to call it a conversation, because there's responsibilities on both sides. Me as a presenter, I have to present you enough information that you can then consider and then give me really constructive feedback on that set of criteria. So I think when you look at it in that sort of frame or perspective, that you have an opportunity to even use these tips as the one giving the feedback.
Awesome. We have several more questions.
And tell me if that was helpful, or if it's, yeah, let me know if that's helpful or not. We can keep talking about it.
Okay, so our next question comes from Ava. Learned so much. When it comes to critique, we know to take it in a positive way, but a lot of times we end up self-doubting ourselves. What advice would you give to still remain focused and motivated?
So it is really to the last part that I talked about, is really trust your work, trust the intent that you were driving towards, and know that it's not all going to be perfect. It's a process. I know when I first started designing, I would come up with ideas and be so excited to share them, then to be critiqued by a principal, by a project lead, who would then inform my decisions represented in my work differently, because they had a different perspective. And so at times that was crushing, but what I learned over time is that perhaps understanding those elements of their critique, I could then ask myself those questions while I was actually doing the work. So I got better at asking questions, and it started to become more exciting to sort of keep exploring how can you make the idea better. And so if you look at your critique as an opportunity to enhance sort of your ideas and your thinking, then you can take sort of all of those sort of icky feelings that we get over maybe, well, whether someone liked it or not, we can sort of reframe those so that you can take that information and use it as a tool to improve upon your design.
Awesome. Okay, so I think, here we go. Sage asks, I have always been a big fan of critiques as valuable part of the process, but even then I have had a couple that have really discouraged me. Do you have a mantra to hold onto in those moments?
Please always acknowledge your humanness. We are human beings. You know, we get hurt. Things happen where they don't turn out the way that we think. That is a part of our human experience. I believe my personal mantra is always to really consider, and my company does this, is what could I have done better? I don't spend a whole lot of time focusing on sort of judgment or shame or feeling like I let I let myself down or the client down. But I quickly place that criticism that is a bit jarring to me. I put it on a platform that starts asking me questions about, could you have done this better? Could you have looked at it from a different perspective? And to leave myself a space for that to happen. And as long as I have space to have a response, I feel unrestricted by critiques. They're always an opportunity for me to share information and to improve upon my ideas. And that's what a critique is focused on. And even if someone doesn't understand that, who's critiquing you, you have an opportunity within your critique to state those things, that to state that these are the things that I am expecting out of this critique to better inform my ideas and to better inform my processes. And so in that way, you are in control of the impact of the critique.
Awesome. Thank you, Sage. And here we are. Lauren asks, was there a specific critique you went through that changed your perspective on them? Or did your perspective change gradually as you continue to do them?
So it's interesting. They changed gradually as I did them more and more. But there was a moment I received a horrible critique. And this was in this was actually quite recently. This was in the last probably year and a half, where someone completely just ripped to shreds a presentation that I did. And I could recognize that they were going out of their way to be mean, but it still affected me. And I have to tell you, I was presenting to a group of 125 people. We had an engagement of feedback. We had 115 people reply. 114 comments were positive and loved the presentation. And it's that one person that kept me up that night who just ripped my presentation to shreds. And so it took me a long time, but you know what I did? I actually printed out the commentary and I put it up on the wall. And I used that as a check and a gauge. It's like, okay, they said this. How can those comments drive me to make sure that my next presentation digs deeper or addresses these things that they felt that I didn't do? So I actually used it as a bit of a checklist to reinforce my approach. And so to take something that could be seen as negative and make it a positive part of your process is helpful. But I got to tell you, man, if I ever meet that person, I want to have a real conversation with them. Because it was not cool. It was not cool.
It's always one person, and you're right. It is always that one out of, let's say, 1,000 different comments or reviews or just anything. Like, there's a lot of power to that. Even if there's 999 positive voices, why is it that a lot of the times people just focus on that one negative so much? I mean, you leveraged it to your advantage, but for let's say the average person, what are ways that they can tackle that? Because they may not possess the same strength as we do in terms of receiving critiques.
Right. I think part of, and it's funny. I think there's some science behind. I think you need was it 32 positive affirmations to erase one negative one. It's something about the way that we're wired as human beings that we want to be genuinely accepted and loved because it actually speaks to our connectivity to a community. It makes us feel useful and a part of something that's bigger than ourselves. So I think one to acknowledge our humanness to say, okay, I feel this way is extremely important. But I think also to put it into context that this is just a moment in time. This isn't your life story. This isn't the end of your existence. It's not the end of your story. You're still writing it. Um, and it's important that you recognize moments that are trying to you so that you can really tackle them head on and say, okay, this doesn't make me feel good, but how can I use this? How can I use this to change my approach or to move on or to move forward? And it's the only way that we can address things in our life that really cause us some disruption and pause. It's all a part of growing. And the funny thing is that we all go through it. Even the person that's being mean and giving that critique or has offered up that negative response has gone through something similar. So again, it's important for us to recognize that we have a lot of shared experiences, and to take those experiences and make sure that we're addressing them in a positive manner.
Well said. Let's see. I think we have one more audience question. Well, EMK12, many times will be critiqued by multiple people. How do you handle contradictory feedback?
Right. So that is the great thing about setting the criteria and telling your audience or those critiquing you, what are the things that actually determined if I met my goals? Because it actually really keeps them in line to respond in a manner that is helpful for you in the process and that you can apply it. And then literally, if you find information that you've received as you've gone through it and as you grapple with it and as you apply it to some of your criteria, if it is contradictory, then it contradicts. You put it in a bucket in a parking lot over there that says, okay, this isn't extremely helpful right now. Let's focus on the things that really inform or impact my thinking in the process and do those ones first, and then go back to that one that seems contradictory and see if it has any value. The reality is that you get to respond in a manner that you think is the best approach to achieving your criteria. And I would say when you go back to those individuals that perhaps had a contradictory view, you can express why you think that it didn't it was why you understood it to be a contradiction, but why you responded to the contradiction in the way that you did, and then have a conversation about it. But ultimately, you get to respond with the information that you're receiving.
Awesome. On the, to go off of the idea of contradictory feedback, or in some places they would just call it negative reinforcement, but during a bit of my research, I came upon this one phrase which really bothered me, and it's pertinent to yourself as well because you graduated from OCAD, and the statement was, there are no bad critiques, there are just weak students. And I think that's an awful culture to cultivate. But I've heard a lot of different things about different art colleges where they literally just roast you to the end. Why is this culture of negative reinforcement so prevalent? I think of what you have to say as a breath of fresh air, and I think that should be the way the culture is going. But how did negative reinforcement become the norm in some studios?
Right. Well, I think one, whoever made that comment is poorly informed of just the responsibility, one, to uplift emerging professionals, but also just being a human being. That's not helpful for anyone. And receiving that information, we have to be, I think, fortified within ourselves to say, oh, wait a second, that's not even worth my time considering, because it's not coming from a place that's helpful. And unfortunately, we are in a bit of a dispensation where, being negative is easy, because it allows us to wall ourselves off from our responsibility of being human and caring and considering others. So that's a challenge that is going to prevail. But I think what we can do is bring our humanness to that circumstance to say, well, I have a different perspective of that, or I take a different view from this, and you bring your human lens to it. Because I believe, and this may sound a little cheesy, but I believe that humanity wins. Um, there's this sort of saying that the darkness can't contend with light. In a dark room, when you flip on the light, the darkness disappears. So bring your light always to a situation and a circumstance, and state how you want the conversation and the interaction to go, and let it be a human one.
Well, that's incredibly promising to hear. I'm incredibly heartened that this is the direction of the discourse, because for my past, I think I mentioned before the talk, I used to work in the food industry, and it was
Right.
nothing but negative reinforcement. You bake some weird errant loaf and your chef comes in, slams it on the counter and asks, multiple curse words, what is this? A lot of people excuse that and they say, oh, it's tough love. It's designed to make you stronger. But clearly it hasn't, because you can see it across multiple industries where that type of behavior, it's problematic and it's toxic. Do you see
Right.
that being sort of rooted out? Is that like a big discussion that people are having these days within the industry?
So I think there are multiple sort of factors that are contributing to the level of frustration that people are unfortunately using to fuel their responses or interaction with each other. And I have these conversations at times with clients, because they're driving so quickly to a solution because of the environment that we're in, and it puts a lot of pressure on people. That is in no way to excuse the behavior. And quite honestly, I can share with you that I've been in rooms with meetings with people yelling and screaming at me. But very early on in my career, I actually wrote sort of things down that I would accept in interactions. And this comes really from me, sort of from my culture, but also understanding my perception in the world as a person of color. But that I don't accept people yelling at me. And I've literally left a room with presidents and executives who were screaming and said, when you have the opportunity to calm down, that we can have a conversation, I'll be back. And I've got up and left rooms in order to make a statement to say, look, we can behave better than this, and I don't have to take abuse. I don't. I'm not going to abuse you, and I won't receive abuse. You're going to get the best of me. You're going to get the best of my talent, of my skill, and my time. And that's what we should be bringing to the table, not just our pure frustration or bad behavior. So very early on, you can express, and I encourage emerging professionals to do this. And notice that I'm calling you emerging professionals. You are not just a student. You're a problem solver. You are an emerging professional that is going to solve the issues that are very prevalent in our future world. So think of yourself as a professional. You are practicing in school to approach your work and your craft with professionalism. and you can define those parameters to do that.
I think that in addition to the 5 T's, that is some of the best advice, especially on the topic of BIPOC creators. Just this idea, because definitely I felt a lot of fear when I started off in several other industries where it was, okay, they said that word, you can't say anything. You can't disrupt the chain. You have to keep your head down and just ignore it. That's just how it is. And I think in this day and age, that's how it is no longer how it should be. So I think I just want to, because we are close to the end, and I just want to quickly say to everyone, you have that right to protect yourself. You have to come first. And I think would you agree that if we continue this trend where we uplift people and humans first, that we could actually alleviate a lot of concerns that marginalized voices have?
I absolutely believe at our essence and core as human beings, we want to be good. And so it's my focus with the work that I do to establish that and to give opportunity and space for you to be good. We have to approach our work with humanity and humanness, and to call out when we're not approaching it that way. I was actually on a call yesterday speaking to a group and with clients, and mentioned to them that I'm placing myself in your hands, because I'm going to be open and honest with you and transparent. And I'm trusting you that you are going to handle what I have to share and offer with you in a manner that is going to be respectful to me. And I said, I promise to do the same thing for you. So we have the opportunity to elevate the conversations we have around the work that we're sharing as individuals. But we can also give space for us to be better human beings to each other and demand it. We can say, this is the premise on which we're going to have this discussion. We need some honesty, we need some integrity, some care, and some trust. And that's the premise. And then it makes it easier to call out. It's like, wait a second, you're not being honest. Or, well, we said we're going to, be transparent. It sounds like you're not being completely forthcoming. So set the rules of engagement, but embody them as well, right?
Awesome. I have one more question I wanted to ask, unless there's any more questions from the audience. Can't really see their chat. Nope, doesn't look like it. Well, I mean, we sort of did answer it in terms of BIPOC creators and just creating spaces for everyone to just basically grow. I guess my question is, do you think, and this is a question that I have asked a lot of creators, is like, do you think because of the pandemic and how it's exposed a lot of gaps in our human infrastructure, do you think we have the capacity right now to exact some real change and not go back to the old ways? Or is there like what do you see on the horizon?
Right.
I know that's a very loaded, open-ended question, but you can critique me later on that. So
no worries. You've done a fantastic job. I believe that we are living in a moment that has allowed us to reflect and to consider where we are as individuals, as a community, as a nation. What I want us to do moving forward is to understand that moments pass, and we have to be mindful that we create space for this to be our sort of reflections and realizations to be a part of our constant critique of how we can be better individuals, how can we engage with the communities better, how we can serve the idea of Canada better. And I say that with the understanding that there is an image of Canadians that we carry that we haven't completely lived up to, but we have an opportunity to. And I think from the disruption of the last 18 months, to be able to sort of focus on how we can, one, change that narrative, because we can only bring about change with ourselves first before we can really realize it outside of ourselves. And so I'm hopeful that we have an opportunity to really see this change through.
Well, that unfortunately is where we're going to have to end today. I would love to continue this conversation with you later. If I have any critiques, it's that we don't have enough time. I have a lot more things to say about this, but for now, everyone, join us at 5 p.m. for our panel discussion, Elevating BIPOC Voices in Design. And you can register via the YES website at yes.schoolofdesign.ca. Ian, thank you so much. And to our listeners and viewers, thank you again. Anna, thank you for moderating everything. See you guys at 5 o'clock.
Thank you.